Hello, welcome. Sorry for the bit of delay in the wait room. Welcome. My name's Claire. I'm your host tonight. I work for Climate Generation, and we'll be getting into the presentation in just a moment, but I have a few opening slides before I hand it off to our presenter for the night. So again, welcome. This month's Teach Climate Network workshop is Teaching Climate Change with Moose. This workshop is part of our Teach Climate Network workshop series, where we hope to bring the best practices of climate change education to you and create opportunities for you to connect with the professional community of climate change leaders and educators. This workshop is also part of the Midwest Educator Community of Practice, where we are dedicating 4 workshops throughout the year to highlight Midwest-based speakers and topics that offer pathways to climate change education in the region. And if you're interested in the Midwest, you might be interested in the Midwest Climate Change Collaborative Summit. Early bird registration is open now, and I'm just gonna slip that in the chat. Just a moment, if I can. I will do it once I'm done sharing my screen, actually, in just a moment, but you'll see it in the chat. And if you're not in the Midwest, this workshop will still have plenty of information for you, so no fear with that. All right. As part of the Teach Climate Network, you will also have access to all of our free resources. If you haven't checked them out yet, I will be putting that link in the chat as well. They're really awesome. As you settle in, you can get comfortable in Zoom with your settings so that you can participate. Please stay on mute during the presentation, but then you can engage in the chat. You can turn on closed captioning as well. My name's Claire, and I'm here to support with tech today. So if you need anything, just find me in the chat. It should say Claire Cook. And then before we jump into today's workshop, I wanted to make sure that you're aware of next month's workshop, which is Drawdown Stories, Climate Solutions in Our Words. And it's on Wednesday, January 21st, from noon to 1 Central Time. This workshop introduces the power of climate storytelling as a tool for climate connection, education, and action. We'll explore how personal narratives can bring climate science down to earth and make it human, make it local, make it real. Drawing from Project Drawdown, Drawdown's neighborhood storytelling work. We'll look at an example of how everyday people are shaping climate solutions, and participants will leave with a clearer sense of their own story and how to share it with courage and care. So that's next month's workshop. And then, as I mentioned, today's Teach Climate Network workshop is Teaching Climate Change with Moose, presented by Emma Singer with Friends of the Boundary Waters. Emma Singer is the Twin Cities Education Coordinator for Friends of the Boundary Waters. Emma works with the rest of the education team at Friends to support student trips to the Boundary Waters, classroom visits, and online resources for grades 6 through 12. Emma has more than 10 years of teaching experience in outdoor education as a naturalist and a classroom science teacher. She is committed to helping teachers find creative ways to bring authentic scientific inquiry into their classrooms and connect with the outdoors. So thank you so much, Emma. We are so excited to have you here today and hear from you. And I will hand over the presentation to you and stop sharing.
Sounds good. Thanks, Claire. Wow, I
Thank
have
you.
never formally been introduced before. That was really exciting. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick. Like Claire said, my name is, ooh, is that gonna work? I think that worked. Great. I'm seeing positive affirmation that it worked. Um, so I'm really excited to get to talk with you all today. Couple things. I am not alone today. There's actually two of us today to talk to you. I'll put this up just for a minute while I drop some things in the chat for you. My goal for you all today is to leave you with some really helpful resources that you can bring into your classroom and can kind of just grab and go. And hopefully you have some new connections with people doing similar climate work. So the first thing I want to drop in the chat for you is a link to a Google Doc that's just going to give you a quick outline for the workshop so you know kind of where we're going. And then it also has links to all of the resources that we'll be sharing throughout the lesson. So it's got the slides, it has a full curriculum resource, and then it also has some information on us. And thank you. I will give you all share access. You should have access, but for some reason, Google Drive is weird. So, um, I will keep giving you share access. If you can't see anything, just send it my way. Beautiful. Thank you all. While I do that, I am gonna just let you know a little bit about what's going on today. So we're gonna talk through a couple of things. We're gonna do a quick introduction just to the Boundary Waters and to our organization. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about why teaching climate change is important in your classroom and why we should teach it locally. And then we're going to spend some time looking at what I'm hoping is a really useful resource for you. Ooh. We're gonna work a little bit in breakout rooms, and then we're gonna have some time to just kind of make some next step action plans. So I'm gonna go ahead and respond to all of those share requests so that you can view everything. And I'm actually gonna turn it over to Allison real quick.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Allison Nineheis. I'm the education director at Friends of the Boundary Waters, and super excited to be here today to share with you some of our online resources, in particular our Moose Climate Change Unit. So we're really excited to kind of dig into this unit a little bit today and share a little bit about the Boundary Waters. Apologies for the sharing settings. We've been having some issues with our Google Drive. It says available to the public on our end. So it's just kind of funky. But I'll get started. Emma, do you want me to go into the next slide? Great. So I can share a little about what Friends of the Boundary Waters are. So we're an organization. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. Our organization helped to establish the Boundary Waters, and we have been working since to protect this area. So our organization focuses on doing that in a few different ways. One of those is direct protection of the wilderness. You may have heard of our organization in association with some of the proposed copper sulfide mining in this area. That's a big issue that our organization tackles, along with other threats to this wilderness area. We also protect the wilderness by connecting people to the wilderness. So that's a big part of our education program. Our education program is called No Boundaries to the Boundary Waters, and we work with teachers all around the country. We work with teachers in Minnesota for in-person programming, and we work with about 150 to 200 students each summer on going to the Boundary Waters through scholarships and with their schools. So we have a few different ways that we're working with students, and today we're excited to kind of promote some of the resources side of things that teachers can take and use in their own classrooms. And then the last way that we work on protecting the boundary waters is through communities, and specifically those communities that are really close to the boundary waters. We have staff in Ely and Grand Marais to address community, to strengthen like community ties around the wilderness. It's a really important part of those communities. It provides a lot of jobs. The health of those communities is related to the wilderness. So we do a lot of work in those gateway communities to the boundary waters too. So that's a little bit about us. I am going to drop just our website in the chat if you're interested in learning more. We have lots of different events, something for everyone. So I'm just going to throw that in there. The next thing I'll talk a little bit about is what are the boundary waters. Um, you can do maybe give a little like emoji or whatever the tool is if you've heard of the boundary waters or if you are familiar with the boundary waters. Cool, great. I'm seeing some reactions. That's awesome. If you haven't heard of the Boundary Waters, this is an area in northern Minnesota on the border of Minnesota and Canada. It is the most visited wilderness area in the United States. It is a huge collection of lakes and forests, and it's a wilderness area versus a national park. So it's got some specific rules. There are no motors in the Boundary Waters. So there's no motorized boats. There's no roads or structures. So it makes it a little bit different than a national park. It's very much you're really just fully in the wilderness, and a lot of times you may not see other groups when you're there. So it's a very kind of immersed nature experience. It's a really, people visit it in all seasons, most popular in the summertime, but people do travel in the winter there as well. Um, you can go down one more, Emma. And yeah, like I said, one of the most visited wilderness areas in the country. It's also just as we're on this photo, it's a dark sky, international dark sky sanctuary. So a lot of amazing opportunities to see the night sky and northern lights. And like I said, there's no roads in this area, or motors, so people travel mainly by canoe to the different campsites in the area. They'll portage, which is carrying your canoe and all of your stuff from lake to lake. So it's a really not only a unique travel experience, but because it is so remote, we do see just a really robust ecology and ecosystem going on here. So there's a lot to learn and a lot to take away from your students. These are some of our students on our summer trip. Like I mentioned, a big part of our organization is just connecting students to this landscape to find something they love and something they can identify with in this area.
So Boundary Waters is a really cool and really unique ecosystem. And I wanted to just give a little context of why it's helpful to look at local places and look at unique ecosystems when you're trying to design like a climate change unit. I remember, so I was taught ninth and 10th grade science for years and years. And every time I would get to climate change, I'd be like, okay, gotta go slog through some stuff. And making it tangible for students was really hard. Um, I know that we all know this, but we're seeing really rapid and unprecedented changes in global climate. And so some of this data can be really difficult to look at and really challenging, right? Here in Minnesota, these are predictions of our average annual change. So locally, under any kind of climate model, we're going to see some pretty dramatic changes, and we're already feeling those effects now. When we think about climate here in Minnesota, we know that we're going to see more wildfires. We already are. There's likely to be increased drought. There's more severe storms, and we're seeing changes to biodiversity. And so it's really easy to look at graphs. It's really easy to pull data for your students, but sometimes it's hard to know how to talk about that, especially when we think about kind of climate anxiety. We know like 65% of Americans are worried about climate change. When we look at Gen Z, 85% are worried about it. And so the way that we talk about climate change with our students is really important in terms of giving them actionable steps, but also just in terms of like easing that anxiety. And so there's a lot of really awesome research that shows that using solution-based instruction and helping to foster critical hope can really change the narrative that our students have, and can also just make your classroom experiences more powerful. So local case studies are one way you can do that. And so we're going to show you one today that's hopefully a little helpful. So I'm going to talk you through a climate change resource that's in that Google Drive. But I'll also send it out again too. And again, if you're not able to see things, keep sending those share requests and I'll keep sending them back as fast as I can. But one of the resources that you're going to get today is this climate change and moose curriculum resource. It's a set of 5 different lessons. And the idea is for you to kind of grab and go what feels useful. So there is a sequence, there are roadmaps that I'll show you a little later. but the real goal is just to give you more support to localize your climate change education. So there's 5 different lessons. The first is just an introduction to the boundary waters. It allows students to kind of explore, see some really cool images, learn about leave no trace, learn a little history. And then they start kind of down this investigation. So our second lesson looks at biomes. Sorry guys, I'm gonna get really easily distracted by share requests. Thank you for bearing with me.
I was just going to say, Emma, I'm going to drop this is the link to our resource library. There's a
Yeah.
short survey. It really helps us if you're able to fill that out. It tells us how many students are using our materials, helps us for reporting, helps us keep it free. So if you haven't gotten the doc, you can go right into this library. And there's more than just the climate change resource in here. We have lots of other resources too. So that's in the chat right now if you want to find the unit and the share doc isn't working for you.
Yeah. So this is kind of your big picture overview. We're going to look really specifically at this 4th lesson here, which is where students are really doing more inquiry-based modeling. But I wanted to show you kind of the layout of each of the lesson plans. So when you click into that doc, you'll see individual lesson plans for each of the components. They each have slides for you to use. They've got student handouts, and then they have any other additional activities that you need. And then below, there's kind of your breakdown, your step 1, step 2, step 3. You've got your daily objectives. So if you're filling out your learning targets for the week, please use them. But again, the goal is for you to be able to use this in a way that feels manageable in your classroom. So use it however you want, adapt, edit, whatever makes sense. What we're going to show you today is the 4th lesson. So the goal of the whole curriculum is for students to kind of get a sense of the problem that's going on in the boundary waters, which right now, which is that we're seeing declines of moose population, and then to have an opportunity to kind of identify why that's happening. So I'm going to switch us over to our student hats for today. And just like kind of take on your student perspective. We'll look through a little bit of the lesson, and then I'm going to put you all in some breakout rooms to do some work. Before I do that, I'm going to switch it back over to Allison. She's going to introduce for you.
Yeah, so one of the things as a part of this lesson is the digging into what some of these biome characteristics are. So the boundary waters is primarily a boreal forest or a coniferous forest biome. We do have a biomes lesson that you can do with your students. That's one of the ones that Emma mentioned that can come ahead of this. And this is characterized by a lot of by more intense storms. You might have shorter summers and longer winters. You're going to have a cooler temperature range than a lot of Minnesota, and dominated by those coniferous trees. So looking at these photos and some of those characteristics, go ahead and drop in the chat. What are some plants or animal species that you think might thrive in this biome? Nice. I'm seeing some good suggestions here. We've got some animals coming in, a couple of trees, loons, eagles, totally. Emma, you can go to the next slide. So these are, we have a lot of these here. These are some of the plants and animals that are home in the boreal forest biome. And there's a lot of, obviously, as we know, these are very interconnected. We have a lot of animals that rely on parts of the forest for their food, rely on other animals for their food. Everything's all interconnected in this ecosystem. One of these species is the moose. This is an animal that is found in northern Minnesota. You're not going to see it in all of Minnesota, but in the northeastern part of Minnesota. It used to be found in more of Minnesota, but now we kind of mostly find it in the northeastern corner. But this is if you've seen a moose before, you might know they're a really large herbivore. They are a lanky animal. They can get really large and they're adapted to cold climates. You'll see them in the winter time. They're experts at this cold climate up in northern Minnesota. But recently, yes, recently we have seen a decline in Minnesota's moose population. So you can see here, this is from 2005, and you can see there's a really pretty big decline. We have some resurgence, but in general, we've seen a decline in the moose population really for the last 10 to 15 years. And so part of our investigation today is we are going to investigate why have moose populations in the Boundary Waters why have they been declining? And what is the role of climate change in this population decline? So this is our main topic of our investigation. And in our breakout groups today, we are going to get some tools to do that. I
Yeah,
think that's you, Emma.
that's me. So the goal of this lesson is really for you all to have an opportunity for your students to be able to kind of solve this question on their own and to really support a claim with evidence. So to do that, we're going to put you into some breakout rooms and you're going to get two resources. Again, just like throw the share requests at me if they're not coming through. The first thing you're going to get are a series of evidence sheets. And I will switch my screen over so you can actually kind of see what those look like. Each of those evidence sheets are going to show you a little different piece of our puzzle, something that's going on. And then to guide you, you're also going to get some questions. So you've got a little bit of background information, and then there's several different puzzles that we're asking you to look at. There's a guiding question for each. It's going to give you specific sheets to look at, and then some questions to think on. Whoops. I am going to stop sharing that screen really quickly.
And I'll say
And
one of we don't have time to dig into all of the different puzzles today. So Emma and I
yeah,
chose two for us to kind of dig into in the small groups. So we won't get the whole picture, but we'll get some of two of the puzzles
yeah.
with the different pieces of evidence.
So when you open up that second one, that Google Doc that I put in, it will force you to make a copy. And that's just so you can go ahead and write down anything that you notice as you go. So in your small groups, I'm going to ask you to look specifically at puzzle 2 and 3. Take some time. I'm going to try and put you in a group where you have about three other folks. So you can kind of talk together, work through, see what you notice. As you're doing this, I'm asking you to kind of put on two hats. So think one with that student lens, just experience the puzzle. And then that second lens is think about like, what if this would work for your students? What do you think maybe wouldn't? And we'll chat about it a little bit when we get back and kind of brainstorm and look some other parts. Questions before I put you all into your rooms? Put my chat box away. Beautiful. If for some reason you can't see things, let me know. We're going to take about 15 minutes to explore and then we'll kind of come back and talk through stuff. All right. And I am just gonna, whoops. I made too many rooms. So give me 1 second while I finish that. I lost the button. And I am going to move you to room 1. Sarah Sparks ended up in a room by herself by accident. So I'm just gonna make sure that doesn't happen to you. Great. There you go. So you should have gotten an invite to a room. Go ahead and join and we'll kind of hop in and check in on folks. And I'm gonna leave that one for now. All right. I'm just going to give everyone an extra minute. I think I've closed out the breakout rooms. We're going to wait for breakout room number 2 to come back. Um, so as you're coming back, I'd love to just hear in the chat patterns that you noticed when you looked at moose populations, questions that came up, and we're going to talk through a little bit kind of what the big takeaway is for that. I know you just looked at some of those puzzles and they're a little tricky to look at on the computer. So thank you for your patience, and thank you all for your patience with the sharing settings. Beautiful. I think we're all back. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison and then I'll talk some more.
Great. Yeah, so I am curious if anyone, we can do this in, you can write a response to this in the chat. But if anyone would rather just share, you feel free to unmute and share with us. Otherwise, you can type it into the chat. But I know we just did a small portion of the puzzle, but what are some of your main takeaways to this question of why are most populations in the boundary waters declining? And how is climate change connected to this? And so we'll use the format we think blank because to give some evidence to your claim. So go ahead and type that into the chat, or if you feel particularly brave, you can unmute and share with us. Great, thank you, Sarah. That's some great claimant evidence there. Had we gone a little further into the puzzles, we'd get a little more of that climate change connection. So the next puzzle, yep, puzzle 2 and 3 is a little more of the habitat biome shift. And as you go into that fourth puzzle, we look at some climate data of a low emission scenario for the next 50 years and then a high emission scenario. And students can compare what that does for the average annual temperature and how that might shift with the biome profiles that they've looked at. So they can kind of analyze what biome would this fall in a high emissions annual temperature scenario or a low emissions annual temperature, and kind of analyze where does the biome fall in both of those scenarios. So yeah, we didn't get as much into the climate piece during just the puzzles we did, just more of that habitat and biome shift.
Awesome. Thank you all for kind of taking on a little bit of puzzling and a little bit of kind of exploring. I wanted to give you all just some time to kind of look at this resource and think about what you notice. Three sort of big questions, and I'll put you back. We'll keep you in one group, and I'd love just input. You can either speak out or put things in the chat. What was it like to look at those evidence sheets? What did you think worked well? What was challenging for you? If you're thinking about doing this with students, would this work for them? Would it not? What would you need to change or adjust? And then where do you see this fitting in a climate unit? But I'd love thoughts on any of those 3 kind of bolded questions. I'll mute myself so you have time to think, throw things in, and we'll just kind of problem solve some stuff a little bit before we look at some of the rest of the resource.
In our group, we commended the evidence sheets. We thought that they were very visually appealing, and I mean, for me, I teach high school, and I felt like they were, for the most part, easy to read. There were a few that I had to zoom in with my old person eyes, and like I felt like the puzzles were chunk wise, like good for like small, quick group activities.
Yeah, Catherine, go for it.
Yeah, I also really like the evidence sheets. And, I left it going, hmm, but what about urban expansion? What about fire? What about this? What about that? Like, what about all these other issues? And so now I'm looking at all the maps around and I'm like, well, okay, there was a big fire, it looks like, a little while ago. But in terms of urban areas not so bad, agriculture, which is where deer come in, not so bad. And so I think your evidence sheets would be strengthened if you put some of those in and you show that, okay, there was a big fire in this area, but like if there's no tie-in, there's not a lot of agriculture, right? And so you could still educate kids about things that are impacting moose elsewhere. But you know what? Based on the review of evidence, it seems really strong that it's actually the tapeworm, the climate change, that type of thing. So I think, yeah, having evidence sheets and maybe not call them, other things to think about or something like, what about agricultural impact? What about urban expansion, which we know in other areas has a big impact on deer? But do you know what? In this area, it's not. And so, because you're going to have a lot of urban kids, I was talking about there's kind of a missed opportunity, but then again, maybe it comes in the later lessons about, who's driving climate change? It's humans. Do you know who's driving urban expansion? It's humans. And so, being able to articulate that, in some other areas, moose are actually being impacted by urban expansion and wetland loss. But that's not the case here, right? In the boundary waters, you probably still have a lot of the original wetlands. So that's evidence in your package that the kids could go, oh, it must not be that then, if we don't see a lot of change there. And it just strengthens the climate change link.
Thank you. Other thoughts? I have thoughts, but I'm going to try it.
What was the target age group for this lesson?
Yeah, so our goal with this is to kind of a lot of our resources, we work with 6th through 12th graders. And so we try and make resources that are adjustable for anyone in that range. So one of the things, and I'll kind of put this up just so you can see. So part of this resource is there is a large roadmap to kind of talk you through some different options and some places where you can go and you can do a secondary research project to bring in some of that other access. And you can go and you can tie in extension puzzles, or you can look at effective climate change on other species. So there's recommendations in here for middle school classrooms, but also for high school classrooms. A lot of the graphing and standards are aligned with some 10th grade biology and some 9th grade climate data. So it's a broad range, but the goal is, again, to make it accessible, whatever pieces it is or whatever's useful at that 6th through 12th lesson level. That was a long-winded answer.
That's fine.
I do want to show you one of the things that I think, and one of the reasons that we tried to keep it hyper-specific was so that students leave this with the option to look at some solutions. And so in that lesson that we just looked at with the evidence sheet, they're looking at kind of the source of those problems. And then they get that 5th lesson, lesson 5, as an opportunity for them to look at some strategies for how we're addressing climate change. And so some of those solutions are, here are ways that people are reducing fossil fuel usage. Here are land use strategies. And here are different management styles that we can do. And there are links to real research that's happening across the state and on a more global level. The unit does also end with the opportunity for students to do future research on additional species to see how they're impacted. So I wanted to make sure I gave you this resource depending on kind of how your classroom fits. That lesson 4 is meant to be a standalone. You can use it, you can run with it and kind of end it there as just a dive in and play and look at some cases, get used to doing some data analysis, do some graphing, look at different kinds of metrics and still see the pattern clearly. And there are some options for if you're local and in state and want us to come and support some work, we'll come and do a biomes lesson with you and do some tree ID. And then there are options for how you can do this either as a full lesson series at different grade levels and with block scheduling. So that's kind of my big ways to do it. Woo. I wanted to make sure I left 5 minutes at the end just to give you all a chance to kind of check in, and I'll put these questions back up on questions that you had about the resource, questions you have about the boundary waters and climate change, and then any questions you all have for Allison and myself. So I'll maybe leave that last slide up.
I see the question about the winter ticks. That is a piece of the puzzle we want. This is the moose are such a compelling species because there are so many different climate impacted things kind of happening and impacting them. Yes, winter ticks was one that I wanted to work in, and I think in the end it ended up being a little too muddled with too many different things. But that certainly could be something you extend with because those are definitely impacting moose as well, just with temperatures being higher and them having more tick kind of life cycles throughout the winter. The shared resources, Emma shared that. And then I put that link to the online unit resource one more time. We do send out a monthly educator newsletter with any of our new resources or other education opportunities with our organization or some of our partner organizations.
I also do want to highlight one of the resources that is linked in the curriculum is we'll send you to GLIFWIC, which is the Great Lakes. Oh, shoot. We'll see if I can fully remember the acronym. Allison's going to remember it better than me. Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. And they've done some really incredible work looking at different effects of climate change on species, not only from an indigenous perspective, but also using Western science. And so looking at that intersection with those two-eyed lenses. And so there's a suggested project in there that allows students to do independent research looking at other species besides moose, and then look for those interconnected between how are the same solutions going to work for moose that will work for other species. But it's a really great resource for anyone who's kind of trying to incorporate more lenses and more perspectives into their science classrooms. Yeah, they're so awesome. That's like, I rave about them. The Beings on the Move is another really incredible resource, yeah, especially for bringing in other Midwest species into your classroom. Yes, and it definitely is a really nice time in. Amazing. Well, again, thank you all so much for coming and sharing space and giving your insights. We'll hang out for any questions. My information and Allison's information is both on there. So if you'd like to use the resource, please do. If you have trouble with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. Keep sending share requests if you can't see anything. But thank you all. We really, really appreciate it.
And I will just thank you two for presenting, Emma and Allison. That was a fantastic presentation. And one more plug for next month's Teach Climate Network workshop. I'll put all the links from the beginning in the chat again. But thank you so much and have a great evening, everyone.